So anchoring is a type of cognitive bias in which a person puts too much emphasis on a specific piece of information having to do with a situation. And in negotiations, this is the value that's attributed to a specific piece of information. So once an anchor is set and a value is set to that anchor, all further negotiations and questions and discussion is based off of that anchor's value. And that's why it's so powerful, because it's setting a starting point. So think about someone who's at a car dealership and they go there and there's a car that's listed for $30,000. That is the anchor price for that car. And then if someone goes and looks at that $30,000 car and ends up purchasing it for $29,000, they feel like they got a steal because they paid less than the price that was listed on that car, less than the anchor price. But in reality, the true value of that car might have been $26,000 and they were actually paying more than the true value of that car. But that doesn't matter because the anchor was set at $30,000. And that's why this is so powerful. And to take this one step further, there's a paper titled Judgment Under Uncertainty, Heuristics and Biases by Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman. And part of that paper, they do a test that shows that it doesn't even matter if an anchor is completely unrelated to the question being asked, the anchor still has an effect on the answer. And how they proved that, they had people spin a wheel with the numbers 1 through 100 on it, and they'd spin that wheel, it'd land on a random number, and then after landing on the random number, they'd be asked to estimate the percentage of African countries in the United Nations. And first they would have to say if their estimate is higher or lower than the number that they randomly landed on, and then they'd give their estimate. And they showed that on average, if someone landed on a 10 on the board, their estimate for the percentage of countries was 25, but if they landed on a 65 on average on the board, their estimate for the percentage of African countries was 45%. So there's a huge difference just because of an unrelated number that landed on a random wheel. So this shows that anchoring is so effective even when we don't even realize what's going on. And another fascinating study done on this shows that even experts are completely manipulated by an anchor price, whether it be low or high. And this study was done by Gregory Northcraft and Margaret Neal. And what they did was they took a group of university students and a group of real estate agents and they had them appraise houses. But along with those appraisals, they would send them a suggested price or worth of that house. And it showed that it scaled directly. The higher that they would suggest a price, the higher the students and the experts would price that house. But we as humans always think we're smarter than we are. And in reality, there's a lot more going on behind the scenes that we're not totally aware of, and little biases that are tripping us up along the way. And now at this point, you might be thinking, this information is great, but how do I protect myself from being swayed from an anchor? And the unfortunate answer is there's not a super good way. We're basically just like bags of meat walking around with biases and heuristics. And the most you can really do is try and reject the anchor and honestly not even think about it. Something you can do is clarify the information of the other party to try and get that anchor information out of your head. So if you clarify the why, what are their intentions and motivations of selling, focus on any other information besides the anchor and ask clarifying questions, anything you can think of to try and separate the information of the sale from the anchor or price of the sale. That's kind of the best you can do, but you still are going to be affected, unfortunately, in some way from the anchor. And finally, let's talk about how anchoring saved me $30,000. And this was on the purchase of my house. And it's kind of a unique experience because I was renting the home that I currently live in before I purchased it. So I use this concept because I had a lot of knowledge about what exactly the seller wanted in this deal. So I used that knowledge and then used some price points to save a ton of money. So I went into it telling my landlord that I was interested in purchasing the next house that I lived in, and I might be interested in purchasing this house, as I knew that he was thinking about putting it up for sale. He wasn't sure, but he wanted to talk to me about it. And I knew if I was the one to purchase this house, it would save him a ton of money because this house wouldn't be on the market ever. He wouldn't have to wait, months for it to sell. He wouldn't have to hire a real estate agent to list it or, pay a real estate agent commissions or, all the various expenses that go into selling a house, because he'd just be able to sell the house immediately. And to me, someone he knew, I was already pre-approved. So I knew the situation would be so easy if he sold to me. So I used that to my advantage. And when we finally met up to discuss the purchase of the house, with this knowledge in mind, I gave him an offer that was far below market value. So the market value of the house when I purchased it was probably around $390,000, $395,000. I offered him $320,000. So using anchoring, I offered super low, and of course he was pretty shocked right away with that number, and it was like a no way, that's way too low kind of thing. I didn't expect him to take $320,000, but the goal here was to set the bar really low and set that anchor low. So then I asked him, okay, what's your counter offer? He counter offered $410,000, which is almost like an anchor in the other direction. But I wasn't going to go anywhere near that, because I knew he would save something like $35,000 by selling to me instead of going to the market and selling to someone else, potentially more than $35,000, depending on how long it was on the market. So it was a bit of an awkward conversation, and negotiations are awkward, or can feel awkward anyways. So be ready for that in any negotiation, especially if you're playing hardball. It's not going to feel comfortable. So be okay with the silences, because I make that offer, he made his counter offer. I was like, no, that's not going to work. He didn't expect this. He didn't expect it to be a tough situation. He thought it would be an easy sell, closer to the price that he thought. So we ended up not making an agreement on the first meeting. I told him, hey, this is my price. I'm sorry, this is as high as I'm going to go. You're going to save this money by selling to me. I think it's a fair price. Talk to your wife, think about it, and let me know. But that anchor was in his mind, the $320,000 anchor. So like 4 or 5 days later, he contacted me asking me if I'd be willing to do something like $390,000. So he had already gone down $20,000 from his original purchase, ideal purchase price. And I was like, no, sorry, that's not ideal for me. I can go and look at any house. I don't have to buy this house. So the power's in my position there, because it didn't really matter to me which house I purchased, but he would save money if I purchased his house. So I knew I was in a position with more negotiating power there. So I strung it along a little bit longer and longer. 5 or 6 more days go by, and he offered me slightly lower price, something like $380,000. I think he dropped it by about $10,000. And that was getting more in my ballpark. So I raised mine counter offer up to, I think, $335,000. He was still like, that's way too low. And I was like, okay, let's meet again. Let's work something out. So we met again, and I came into the meeting knowing that for $370,000, I would purchase the house that was much lower than market value, and totally worth it to me at that price. So I went into it and I said, you know what, I'll go $370,000. I think that's fair. And he was like, that's way too low still. I can't, emotionally part with that, because I purchased the house for that price 12 years ago, and just for the same number, I just can't do it that way, because I'll feel like I had a loss. So then I came up with the idea on the spot where, okay, I'll purchase it for $380,000 if you pay $10,000 of my closing costs. So then it's even easier for me to purchase the house. He doesn't have the emotional attachment to the price, in which it felt like he was making money on the sale. He could say he sold it for more than he did, and it's a win-win all the way. And he was like, that sounds good, let me talk to my wife. So he goes home the next day, he calls me and says, okay, fine, I'll take that deal, $380,000, I'll pay $10,000 of your closing fees, and the deal was done. So like I said, in the end, it ended up saving me about $30,000, because when I got the house appraised, it came out to about $400,000. So I was super stoked on the deal. He ended up saving about $10,000 in selling to me, and I ended up saving $30,000 in the sale. So I was super stoked in this sale and really proud of the fact that I knew some negotiation techniques and was able to work this out in the best way possible. So I hope you found this video illuminating, and I hope you can use these techniques in some negotiations in your life. Hope you found it useful, and I'd like to thank you for watching. If you like this video, please remember to like it. I would appreciate that so much, and other than that, have a great day.